But I'm not here to talk about the nuts and the bolts of what the Kollel does. What I want to talk about is how their work has impacted me and my family. To tell you this story, though, we must travel back in time. I was not raised Jewish. I had never heard a word of Hebrew until 3 years ago. I did not know anyone who admitted to even being a Jew. Although I knew my ancestors were of Jewish descent and had heard that since my mother was Jewish, I was Jewish, I did not know what this meant and dared not tell anyone, as I had learned to be ashamed of my bloodline. My mother was raised eating challah and watching her grandmother light the candles every 7th night. But my mother was given no context for these rituals. The practice of Judaism and the identity of being Jewish were held from my mother, and therefore from her children as well. I was orphaned at 11, and so Jewish heritage were uprooted from my life. 3 years ago, I became friends with an Orthodox Jewish woman, Andrea Levin. She had invited me over for Shabbat, and as the evening moved on, I commented how lucky she was to really be Jewish. She looked at me and said, "This is all yours too. You are a Jew." I argued that I didn't know anything about Judaism and that I had never been in a synagogue. She convinced me that I was Jewish enough and that none of those things would make me more Jewish than I was in that moment. A few months later, on a Friday evening, as I was placing dinner on the table, I remembered that it was about to be Shabbat. I searched through my cupboards and found an unopened bottle of blueberry juice, and I made 2 pieces of toast and fumbled through some made-up prayers, and my family had our first Shabbos. My friend told me about the Discovery Weekend, and I signed up, traveled from Vashon Island, and took my youngest son to spend the weekend learning about the miracles of Torah. I cannot tell you what it was like to be surrounded for the first time by people who had embraced and were celebrating being Jewish. I was inspired by the learning and moved by the people who welcomed me. I came home and started reading the weekly Parsha, and although I had started to have a Shabbos dinner on Friday, I extended my observance to Saturday as well. Shabbat became a life raft that my children and I looked forward to. Being in the company of all levels of observance at the Discovery Weekend made me respect that Judaism is not all or nothing, and that I could grow wherever I was at, and that was enough. The next year, I signed up for Discovery again, and this time took my youngest son and my teenage son, who was about to graduate from high school. He had been aloof at the changes that were happening in our home as my level of observance increased. He attended the Discovery lectures and admitted that they were fascinating, and was moved by the warmth and the care of the men that he had met. A few weeks ago, my son, who is now away at college, received a letter at my home from his campus Jewish support organization offering him connection and community. To many, this may not be a big deal, but to me, it meant that somewhere on his enrollment form, for the first time, he checked the box that listed him as a Jew. Last summer, my friend suggested I apply to go to Israel. I interviewed with Shendel and Ruxi and was accepted, and in December, flew across the world to join other women to explore and learn in Israel. I stood on the land that my ancestors could only dream of and pray for, and thought of my grandmother often, as I was the first in my family to come back to Torah, the first person in my family to again provide Jewish identity to our lineage, and the first in my family history to have made it to the Holy Land. As I prepared to share my story of what the Kollel has given me, I kept thinking of my grandmother and how, as I was walking out of the Holocaust Museum in Jerusalem, a video was playing of a Holocaust survivor who was speaking about how many people had left the practice of Judaism and tried to assimilate due to the danger In that moment, I understood what my grandmother had lovingly tried to do. I understood that my grandmother had tried to protect my mother and tried to protect me. And I thought about how individuals like you give so freely so that those of us who are Jewish and have forgotten to be afraid have a place to come back to. Places like the Kollel. This is our Kollel. It is for some a place to come to when they have never had the road to Torah before, and for others it is a place to deepen their knowledge, to learn Hebrew, to join others in a community of learning. It is a Jewish home in which all are welcome. We do not individually have to do the work of the Kollel, but we must do the work to support it. We have come together tonight in celebration of the Kollel and their mission. I ask that as you consider what amount you would like to give this evening, to think of each dollar as the purchase of a Torah seed that the Kollel will plant and nurture, growing Torah knowledge, growing Jewish identity, and what has been most important to me, growing a Jewish family. Thank you for helping to continue the work of such an important organization. Please give generously. And let me end with thanking you personally, on behalf of my family, for what you have generously given to me through your support of our Kollel.